Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to Aveco Economic Forum. My name is Akash Subramanian. I am the co-founder of this channel, and I'm currently pursuing my management consultancy.
Hello everyone, my name is Varad Kulkarni and currently I'm doing chartered accountancy course and pursuing my articleship.
Today, in this session, which is season 3, episode 1, we are discussing something very interesting. 10 questions about the macroscopic viewpoint of inflation across countries, where we will be covering three main things. Number one, what are the factors that are jacking up inflation in all the countries, be it developed or developing? Number two, after the pandemic phase, how has the consumer economy responded and how is the economic standpoint right now? Third, what are the major measures which different countries have taken to create economic slowdown while avoiding recession? This is going to be very interesting. So, Varad, are you ready for the questions?
Yes, absolutely. So here are top 10 questions to answer all the macroeconomic standpoints.
All right, number one, is the world economy heading towards a major recession?
Yes, definitely. After the effect of COVID-19 pandemic, where major industrial and economic activities slow down, including the flow of credit, we can definitely see that the world is heading towards major recession, which is also supplemented by the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war crisis. So because of these, world is currently facing some economic challenges, which we will be discussing in broad in next few questions also.
Question number two, how the Russia-Ukraine war has sown the seed of recession across the globe?
So Akash, what happens is Russia and Ukraine both were some exporters of some of the most important commodities throughout the world. Ukraine, for that matter, was one of the most important exporter of wheat and other pulses also. So what happens is in the underdeveloped and developing economies who import food, whose dependence is mostly on the importing of food, has taken a hit. The food budget of these countries have definitely taken a hit and will affect them very negatively. On the other side, if we see Russia, it was a major exporter of natural gas and oil. If we see current scenario, then the increase in oil prices, which is definitely impacting the industrial activities also, is affecting the world economy as anything, which is also accompanied by the Western sanctions which are put on Russia, because of which world is not able to connect the dots of their economic development throughout.
All right, question number three, how does the rise and fall of oil prices affect economic situation of the world?
So Akash, what happens is after the COVID-19 pandemic, where all the industries are trying to get back to the point where they were before the start of the pandemic, the basic factor of growth, that is energy, is the only thing which has become the scarcity. We can see that oil prices have had fallen to a negative mark, which is in the futures market, and in the spot market they were also trading at a record low prices, have now been flowing towards the record high prices, which is also accompanied by US and Iran's nuclear deal, because of which Iran is also not able to substitute the supply of Russian oil in the global market, has taken the global industries to a stage that it is a total breakdown. They have to purchase expensive oil from Middle East and other countries, which is affecting their production cycles. This process is also being taken a hit by the inability of Venezuela, which is also one of the biggest countries who has the oil resources of the world, who is currently unable to provide supplies because of their own internal political situations and fallen government of Nicolas Maduro. So all these factors summed up have somehow taken hit on global industrial output.
Definitely. Question 4. How has the current inflation status brought about a decrease in investor confidence across the globe?
So what happens is when the industry wants to expand, that is after COVID pandemic, the industry has tried to expand itself and they are not having enough supplies. And at the same time, demand side of the economy has also been reviving itself. The interest rates after the pandemic have been the factors which the countries most favored. The flow of credit again increased, and then once again what happens is inflation has been on a record high levels. If you say the US inflation data has been on the 40 years record high pace. This eventually affects the central banks to increase bond interest rates, which takes a hit. So inflation has a major impact on the industrial and economic activities of the nation, I would say.
Summing up all the questions that we have brought forward so far, the main question: what is the actual inflation status across countries, both developed and developing, and what are the economic challenges that they're facing right now?
So Akash, talking about the current status of inflation throughout the world, we can say that industrial inflation in the US has struck to a record of 9.1% in recent times. In India also the figure is looming around 8%, which is out of RBI's inflation target, which is between 2% to 6%. If we talk about Eastern world, that is China and Japan, China is also facing one more wave of COVID-19, and it has also increased its interest rates recently, including if we say on the other hand, Bank of Japan, who have maintained their stature about the interest rates and inflation due to their own internal situations. So summing all it up, Akash, I would say that inflation status around the world is the worrying sign, and central banks are trying their best to target the same. I'll go with the sixth question of this session. What is how would you describe the status of the interest rates which the Federal Reserve and other major central banks throughout the world have been considering?
All right. So, Varad, before I touch upon that factor, any country which is facing a high inflation rate takes two basic measures to fight it. Number one, increase the money supply in the economy, and number two, jack up the interest rate. The traditional approach has been jacking up the interest rate so that there is less supply of money going around. So now what has happened is most of the central banks, for example, the Federal Reserve Bank or Reserve Bank of India, they have increased their interest rates from a range of 25 basis points to 100 basis points. The FDR taking the lead here. 100 basis points, that is 1% of interest rate hike has been seen in the USA, which is a record high. In 41 years, USA has never done this, but the inflation rate has jacked up so much. It's 9.1%, as you mentioned. They had to take up this measure. Most banks, for example, even European Central Bank has raised it by 25 basis points, while India has raised it by 40 basis points. And this is how they're trying to reduce the supply of money, basically, and they're not withdrawing their own supply. Only one is exception, as you mentioned. Bank of Japan has kept their interest rates the same. They haven't increased it. What they're trying to basically create is borrowing costs at the same or lower prices. So this is the phenomena which is being seen.
So Akash, I would like to ask you one more question, which is also very important. That during the pandemic period, we saw the major central banks around the world to print more currency, which will eventually affect that currency to go into the hands of people and again revive the demand. So how do you see currency printing as a factor, and can you explain that to our viewers?
Definitely. So how any currency's value is brought forward is it is pegged against gold reserve. Money as such doesn't have its own value unless it is collaborated with the gold reserve of that country. Giving a simple example, for example, in USA, if they have 1 kg of gold, then the statutory reserve is maintaining about $1 million of worth. So if any country, why they print money is so that there is more circulation of money and people are able to live up to the standard of living, and the consumer price index increases. Now, when there is more money, the gold reserve is yet the same. So for 1 million, now you might have, for example, 2 million worth of currency in the market, which basically reduces the worth of your currency note. So $1 it costs less. which is exactly what's happening in most of the countries now. It's not just India facing the issue of weaker currency. Countries such as Indonesia or even the euro currency, it has basically reduced in value because their supply of gold remains the same, while the amount of money available, the printed currency, is much more. So countries are basically spending more and circulating more money than they can afford, and as a result, inflation is increasing and the cost of living gets higher.
So Akash, our next question is that due to this currency printing phenomena, as we can say, inflation has increased. How the global governing bodies like central banks, government can mitigate this effect? What developments into the economy, or what factors they can bring in so that this effect gets mitigated?
All right, so Varad, there are two measures which every country is expected to take in such a situation. One is increase their export, basically get in more of the supply of money and get their worth more by exporting the goods. And the second is increasing their gold reserves. Now it doesn't matter how they get it, they can find more gold reserves if they want, or they can borrow it from other countries, purchase it. But what essentially they'll have to do is try to evaluate back to their original levels of what the gold supply needs to be, corresponding to what their money supply is. So these are the two main measures. How exports will help them is there is more investor confidence happening, there is more money's worth in the country, and as a result your value increases, there is more exchange happening within your country, so your currency value upholds. So these are the two main measures.
So Akash, next question to you is, in general, how do you see countries go into recession? What are some of the factors which affect the country to go into recession actually?
All right, so Varad, when we say a country is going through recession, it's basically their economic output towards the supply side reducing, and due to this there is a counter effect where two main things happen. One is the inflation gets higher, and second is there is lower income, there is unemployment happening, there is less exchange of economic activities, and as a result demand side gets pulled down. So economic downturn in supply causes economic downturn in your demand, and as a result there are many factors like poverty increases. So even during the current phase, what we have seen is at least 71 million people across the world are expected to go below the poverty line. So that is what a recession creates. A recession creates a decrease in employment, there is less economic activities, people do not know where to work and what is the next step. So that creates an economic standstill while the country tries to fight and get in the income and output from other countries. That is how a recession happens.
Akash, having said all this, how do you think the global government bodies, including the countries, can reduce this effect of inflation and recession, to be specific?
So what every country, at least in the current situation, expects is they have an economic slowdown because of the high inflation rates, but they want to avoid a recession phase which causes unemployment, poverty, and many such factors. Traditionally, how countries do this is taking two steps. Number one, increasing the interest rates, which we have already discussed by different central banks, which has been imposed. Number two is increasing the tax rates so that there is less borrowing, and tax rates could be imposed on import export. It could also be on octroi duty. So everywhere there is the tax imposed, which creates a reduce in demand. And a similar example can be seen in India. Even though oil prices are kind of reducing, OPEC countries are keeping their supply standstill or are making it less available. But in India, the prices are yet high because of the high rates of taxation put here. Petrol, diesel do not come under the GST aspect, so which gives an added advantage for government to increase the cess, increase any such smaller taxation which is to be implied. Now, apart from these two factors, countries cannot really have a lot of control over the supply side. There is very less they can do, and in order to create supply and demand constant, there is one other factor which the government can impose, and that is technological advancement. How they can do is majorly in three sectors they need to increase their technology. Number one is energy, number two is manufacturing, and number three is consumer goods. These three sectors are not only the largest employers in the world, but they also give the highest GDP returns to the country. So once there is technological development, as a result, there can be more employment that takes place. Technology can bring in more demand. And finally, there is stability in the economy. There is fully functioning economic inflow and outflow. And hence a country can face an economic slowdown and recover easily without following beneath the recession level.
One more point to add here is what currently we can see the global scenario is governments are trying to borrow more money. If I give an example, as per latest data, the public debt or external debt of the federal government of the America is standing at $31 trillion, which is more than their annual GDP. And the US government has consistently been trying to increase their debt ceiling to record levels to fuel this effect of recession or to mitigate this level of recession. In India also, we are currently seeing the same case. Our external and or total debt stands at something $630 billion, which is also cause the governments to spend more on the public services like education, infrastructure, that includes dams, bridges, which creates employment eventually and which subsides the effect of recession. We have tried our best to answer all the 10 questions which give you a macroscopic view of the inflation, currency, and all the macroeconomic affairs.
All the viewers, we hope you liked our video. Please put in the suggestions in our comment what should be our next 10 questions to be answered, and we'll be there for you. Like this video, share and subscribe, and have your best day today. Thank you.